Good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited to welcome you today. We're so excited to welcome you today to the 2020 El Paso Homeschool Association Homeschool Conference. We're so excited. This year, our conference is called A Vibrant Community. We are getting started this afternoon with a great talk from a great lady, which I've had the privilege of working with for the past few years. I'm so excited to introduce Lindsay Cronmiller. Lindsay Cronmiller is our website and graphic design director. I'm really excited to work with her because she is, as most of our team would tell you, she has a very humble heart, but she is a secret weapon. She's our secret weapon. She is so talented with the gifts that God has given her, and she has really blessed us with helping us get all of the beautiful website that you have up and that you see before you. And today she's actually going to be teaching us with a talk called An Introduction to Homeschooling. So if you are just getting started homeschooling, or if you are thinking about getting started, please stay tuned to this excellent workshop. Lindsay will be talking to us about different styles, different techniques. As you can imagine, when it comes to homeschooling, not everyone does things the same. So she's going to be walking through some of those differences. Please let any of your friends and family know right now, because of the situation in the world, everyone is basically forced to homeschool right now. So please let your friends and family know, because this is part of the free portion of our conference. So we would like for any and everyone to benefit from this talk. As you're coming on and joining this live workshop, it's really important that you please shut off your camera and put yourself on mute. What happens if we let everybody's video be on or speakers be on? It will actually slow down the recording of this conference. So this will be recorded and this will be up for you to continue to share with your friends and families. And if you're a member, you'll continue to have access to this throughout the year. I am realizing right now that I haven't told you my name. My name is Raquel Ruiz, and I'll be introducing most of the talks that are happening this weekend. So I'm so excited to be here with you for that. I'd like to give a hello to Julia Novoa. She is assisting us in the chat room. So you can drop your questions into the chat room. At the end of Lindsay's talk, Julia will, depending on the amount of questions we have, we will actually have some questions answered live. So that's a great opportunity that we have today. Another great opportunity that we have is the opportunity to win a door prize from the company. It's called All About Spelling. They have a level 1 complete package that we will be raffling at the end of this workshop. So stay in the workshop till the end, and we will pick a number randomly from the people that are in the workshop, and we'll announce that here as soon as Lindsay's done speaking. And with that, I can say that we are ready to begin. I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Raquel. Welcome to Introduction to Homeschooling. I'm excited to share a little bit of my process with you in hopes that it will help you as you begin your journey of homeschooling, whether you're making that decision or jumping right in. This is a little weird, so I feel like I'm talking to myself, so bear with me if there's any weirdness. So I'm going to share just a little bit about me so you get to know me. I have 2 kids, age 6 and 9. This is our 4th year homeschooling, so I'm newer to homeschooling, but it's been a good process so far. My kids have not attended public school at all. We did a year of preschool, and then I jumped into homeschooling my oldest daughter. So a little bit about me. I work from home as a designer and a fiber artist, and I volunteer my time with the Homeschool Association, doing their web design and tech work, as Raquel had said. And I spend the rest of my time homeschooling and all the other stuff that goes along with that. So this is going to be a lot about my process and the journey that I took. I am a designer by trade, so I spend a lot of time researching and I really enjoy it. So that's what a lot of this talk is based on. It's in no way a prescription for success or the right way to do it. There is no right way. My hope is that it just shares a little bit about what I went through and in hopes as you begin your journey. So our homeschool has actually shifted and changed a lot as my kids have grown, as I've realized what their personalities are, their strengths and weaknesses, what their needs are. So it's constantly shifting and shifting just a little bit. In this talk, I will walk you through the process I took as I started my journey. I'll explain goal making and rhythms, schedules, how to decipher learning styles and figure out what your kids are, the many different educational and homeschool philosophies, how to find a community, and just some common questions that we get asked. So to start, I thought we would start with the definition of homeschooling. The association tends to get a lot of questions. And there's some misunderstanding as to what constitutes homeschooling, what doesn't. So just a really basic overview. Homeschooling is when the parent is the teacher, guide, facilitator of a child's education. So they choose the direction of the child's education, everything from curriculum to learning goals to extracurriculars. It can be the parent piecing together the curriculum from different places or buying a box set or any combination of things, but it's the parent who's making that choice, sometimes along with the child, but ultimately that's decided at the family level. The parent is solely responsible for those choices, and the homeschooling families run the gamut. You'll find everything from single parents to one income to two income to working families to families that travel. It's a little bit of everything. There's no one size fits all homeschool family. So there are definitely some sacrifices and concessions that come with homeschooling. Typically that includes things like income level or resources, times or expenses, and what you choose. Homeschooling can be very expensive or it can be very inexpensive. It just depends on the family and what they decide. But at the core of it, it is individualized to the student and the family, and it just does not look the same. Thankfully, we're in El Paso and we have a wonderful homeschool community, and you'll see a little bit of all of this within our community. So on the contrary, on the other side of that, we have the public school, charters, private school. And this is one where the parent is choosing the type of school, but the school is choosing the curriculum and the agenda. So this can even be things like online K-12, where the parent is not necessarily choosing what the schooling is or having much say in what those education benchmarks are, but they are facilitating and helping because, like in everything, parent involvement is the number one indicator of a child's success, whether that's in school or outside of school. There are some sacrifices and concessions in those schooling options as well, and a lot of that is just a lack of control of the day-to-day aspects. You would spend a lot more time advocating for specific needs or wants within the school to get that individualized education. And again, this is not a judgment on what choice a family makes, but there is sometimes some confusion as to what constitutes homeschooling and what does not. And then of course, right now, just with everything going on in the world, we hear a lot about everyone is homeschooling and everyone's trying to figure it out, but really what's going on right now is quarantine schooling. And this is not normal for anyone, even homeschoolers. We're very much missing our weekly nature groups and being able to meet with friends and do that kind of stuff. So that's the basics. So you've decided to homeschool. You've either already pulled your kids out or you're already homeschooling and now you want to figure out where to start. So the first recommendation that I have is that you should make some goals. So goals give you a launch pad for where you're going to go with your education. So what do you want your kids to get from homeschooling? Why are you making this choice? And what advantages do you think this gives to your family and your kids? What skills and knowledge are most important for them to know? Understanding what these goals are will lead you on the path that you want to take. It'll help you whittle down to what resource works best for you and your family. And then you can always come back and reevaluate these too. They're not changeable. So, or they are changeable. You can come back and change them as you grow and as things change. Some ideas of what a good goal is, this just comes from common business practice, is that it should be concrete and measurable. Can you see how you're going to get to this result? So not super pie in the sky, but something that you can actually follow. And it should be attainable. So you can't guarantee your kids will be Olympians. No one can guarantee that, but you can work towards physically fit. So again, not that pie in the sky. And then just incremental. Don't try and do it all at once. Do it steps at a time. So just like I wouldn't expect my 9-year-old to know all 12 times tables the second she turns 9. I wouldn't expect my homeschool to look instantly like what I want it to be. So I think this was one of the most important things I did. And so to take some time to really think about this, to talk it over with your spouse and kids, whoever's involved in the homeschooling, and then just really take some time to whittle this down to what's most important in your life. And I can give you a few examples. These are our family goals, which have changed and grown over the last 4 years, but this is sort of the basics of what we want. So our first goal is that we want our kids to love learning, to know how to ask questions and find answers, to be able to sort out truth from falsehoods. We do this we don't put too much pressure on doing busy work. So we don't do work just to do work. We make sure that it's something that's reaching a goal and not just something to do. So we also show them how we continue to learn and encourage them in the things that they are interested in. So if they see me actively learning and my husband actively learning, then they are more likely to follow in that path of wanting to learn about something. The second goal we have is to have a firm foundation of who they are and to be working towards spiritual and emotional maturity. So that's where it comes. We don't put academics over emotional processing and understanding who we are. So we spend actually quite a bit of time working on how to do that and just being a good person and learning how to function in the world. The third goal that we have is just to have a really good general knowledge of our world and its workings, as well as the time and ability to dive deep into a specific interest if they have one, when they have one. We have lots in our house. So we just do this by, there are mornings where I have a plan and we're doing something, but my kids are actively seeking something else out, and I let them actively seek that out. It's okay to go down those bunny trails when the time comes. So the fourth goal that we have is to develop empathy and compassion while also learning to serve others. And we do this in many ways. Some of the most basics, especially at a younger age, is just reading really diverse books and helping the kids understand the differences in the world around them and how to help the people that they come into contact with. Another way, our fifth goal is to have an ability to problem solve for themselves and for others, and to be makers, not just consumers. And we do this we work a lot on hand and making skills. They're part of our days, and we make our kids figure out their own issues. If they have an issue, we don't just solve all their problems. We make sure that they're solving them too. And this obviously is a parenting thing as well, but it's really good for me to have that reminder to not just jump in and solve it for them. And our sixth goal is just that we want to enjoy our kids' childhood. We only get them for a certain amount of time, and it's pretty short, as the last 9 years have gone pretty fast. So we just want to make sure that we're enjoying it. So we do things we take breaks, we have fun. I try to not be so focused on to-do lists and tasks. And if I am, to take a step back and do something a little bit more enjoyable that we can all do together. And that's learning at the same time. So having these goals has really helped me whittle down the opportunities that I find and the curriculum that I find. There's some really, really cool stuff out there that I would love to be able to do it all, but I can look back at these goals and go, that doesn't really fit into what we want for our family and for our kids and how we're spending our time. So I can step back and say no to it. It makes it so much easier. And I don't say no very well. So The next thing after defining your goals, which is more of a family thing, is to look at yourself as the parent teacher. So you are going to be the one who is leading and who is teaching, and you're the parent, and those things aren't separate. You're doing them all together. And so understanding what you need to make it a success and what you need to get through the days without going crazy, you should look at what do you need more structure? Do you need less structure? Sort of what style teacher are you? So do you need someone to tell you all the steps involved in something, or do you really just want to go by it and go by the seat of your pants and figure it out? How much time do you spend outside of the house? How much time do you want to spend outside of the house? Sort of what are those lines that you need to draw? So if you are on the more structured side, then it's going to, for lack of a better model, is going to model more of a traditional school day approach. Not be the school day, but just model. So you're going to place tasks into time slots. You're going to have a very specific order and tasks that your kids have to complete. It's going to be very predictable. Everyone's going to know usually exactly what's going to happen that day. And I'm sorry if I make it sound not fun, but I am not a schedule person. So I'm trying to not be non-judgmental during this part, but don't be offended because I just can't handle schedules. But there are people who can, and that's what they need, and go for it if that's what you need. So on the opposite side of that, more like what I am, is do you need something more flexible? So model sort of an order to the day, but with a ton of room for change and flexibility. So for me, it places to do sort of in a manner that lets me move through them without time pressures, which is why I'm not a structured person. I put together a plan, and if I don't meet it, then I feel incredibly guilty and I beat myself up, and that's no good for anybody. So I'm definitely more on the flexible rhythm side of things. So it can be predictable. It still has routines. It's just not as specific as a schedule. And that can help a lot of people just feel less pressure to get through everything. So just a couple of examples of just a daily schedule versus a daily rhythm. So a schedule pretty much just tells you what you are doing and when. So like this example, up at 7, math at 8, history at 8:30, playtime at 9, 9:30 is reading. So it's just very much and I'm not saying this is anyone's particular schedule, but it's just, it puts everything in a place. Whereas a daily rhythm sort of gives you a guide. So there might be benchmarks throughout the day that tells you when something's going to happen. So like for us, like you get up, you get dressed, you do your chores, you do breakfast, and if you still have time, you play. And then sometime around 9:30, we start our morning time. And that includes read alouds and poetry and copy work and the lessons that we're doing depending on where we are and what we need to do. And then the next checkpoint would just be noon. This is when we do lunch. Around noon, we do lunch, we do rest time, and then there's another checkpoint in the afternoon for this is when we transition to other stuff as well. So it's more of a rhythm. It's not exact. There's a lot of flow in it. So there are pros and cons to both methods. There's nothing right or wrong about either method, but figuring out which you lean to or need to function will help you a great deal as you plan your days and guide your family as you start homeschooling. So once you figure out your goals, and then you figure out how you will function as a teacher, then I recommend that you look at how your kids learn. So kids, a lot of times we need to spend some time, sorry, I'm gonna back up just a little. Ultimately, it's about educating our kids. So if you have kids in school and you are thinking about taking them out or are planning on taking them out at the end of the year or at any given time, you'll hear the term deschooling thrown around a lot. So deschooling is just taking time off of the traditional learning path. So a lot of times kids, depending on how long they've been in school, will associate learning with being in the classroom. And so the deschooling process sort of gets them out of that mindset and helps them to understand that they can learn at home and that learning will look different at home than it does in a school, because it just won't look the same as a in a classroom with a teacher at the front. So this is usually a time that parents will use just to connect with their kids on an emotional level without the stress of trying to accomplish any sort of academics. So a lot of people will, do walks and bike rides and board games and stuff that field trips, stuff you wouldn't normally do in the school setting. And then use this time to observe their kids as well. So it's definitely not like a vacation time. It's not vacation or weekend. It's not playing video games or watching TV all day or just not doing anything. So there's usually some sort of rhythm or development of rhythm, and then spending time with your kids, observing them. So this time of observing is really important so you can understand how they play, how they interact, what their learning styles are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. What do they get excited about? What do they dread? This is the part where you can start to truly individualize their education. And understand what they need. So do you have a kid who sits for really long periods of time focusing on a single task, or a kid who it's 5 minutes and they need to move on? That'll very much tell you how long they can sit and do a lesson. Do they need to do something physical between tasks to focus? Do they enjoy writing, or do they need to work in sand? So there's lots of different ways that you can observe this time. So it's just a really focused time to watch them and play with them and be with them while you're figuring everything out. So we're going to talk about the learning styles. We're going to talk about there's 7 of them. These change a lot. People have super different ideas of what the learning styles are, and it's constantly moving and shifting. So I just picked some of the more basic ones to kind of walk through so you can see these are basic. Most kids have 2 or 3, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the kid. So as you're looking through them, you can sort of understand what your kids might need. And this will definitely help you as you start to narrow down curriculum choices when you're looking. So the first one is a verbal learning style. So this is a kid who prefers to use words, both speech and writing, to learn. This kid typically remembers what is read or spoken, does well when listening to stories or reading stories, and just relies generally on speaking or writing to learn. One hallmark is that this kid usually has pretty good vocabulary. So that's verbal. Visual learning style is a kid who prefers pictures and diagrams and images, is really good at spatial understanding. So this is a kid who's learning from what they're seeing. They're utilizing their visual memory. So things like diagrams and using symbols and concept maps will help them as they're learning. And then the next we have musical and auditory. So this is a kid who prefers using sounds, music, or rhythms. A kid who can often memorize well with jingles or just talking it through. They would need to be told. They don't really want to just read it. They would really need to hear it as well. And these kids typically really like group discussions, and they're super sensitive to just different audible signals. And then you have physical and kinesthetic learners. And these are learners who need to use their hands, body, and touch to learn. So they need to be doing what they're learning. They learn well while they're acting out or using movements in sand or immersed in an experience like a field trip. So they're definitely a hands-on learner and need to be doing. And then you have the logical and mathematical learners. And these learners prefer to use logic and reading and systems and sequences. They learn by completing the logical steps. They're really good at recognizing patterns and can connect seemingly meaningless concepts together pretty easily. And then you get to interpersonal, or a social learner. And this is someone who just prefers to learn in a group. So they learn by explaining things to others and being a part of a group that's making a discussion. They are just typically really good listeners and good at communicating, and they just do better in a social setting. And then you have intrapersonal, or a solitary learner. And these are just people who prefer to work alone or do self-study. They're typically pretty reflective about learning. They typically do not like group settings or noisy places. They do their best concentration when they're by themselves. So those are the 7 sort of known learning styles. And so typically a kid will have 2 or more learning styles. And this is helpful just in knowing if you're, just for example, my daughter is verbal. She definitely does not need she doesn't need to move around. She doesn't need to use her body. She doesn't really want to, but she just wants to talk and be with people and learn all about it. And so I can change the way that we're doing our learning so that I can benefit her. Like I have definitely had to learn how to use more audiobooks, and I have had to push myself to go out and be in groups more because my daughter is the opposite of me. So it's just really helpful. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't spent some time observing her and just being with her and learning. And those have changed as we've gotten older and I've seen different things. And so it's become easier. So yeah, just taking that time to really observe and see what they gravitate to her, which is usually their strength. And that will help as you narrow down. And the next we're going to talk about all the different educational philosophies that you could or utilize, but you'll see them thrown out. And there's a lot of different curriculums. And so it's really, once you know those learning styles, once you know your style, then you're going to start wading through all this curriculum because there are millions of options and it's super hard and overwhelming to go through them all. And so what I wanted for this section was to just be able to show you that there is a range. There's a range of curriculums that starts with more structured to less structured. So when you can place yourself on the diagram of where you are, it will be easier to narrow down and find what you're looking for. So as we're talking through all of these, we're just going to go from more structured to less structured. And so more structured curriculum would require a child to rise to the curriculum. So a child must rise up and meet the benchmarks that the curriculum is asking for. It is typically more scheduled. Typically it's done in grade levels. It is a more similar model to what is used in public private schools. And it's typically designed for a school, so it's designed outside of the family and home. So just knowing that will help you as we move through. So it is much more what you would see, especially in a private school model. And then we move to the less structured, which would dictate that a child would lead the curriculum. So it's more interest-led. It's typically less scheduled, more rhythmic, more seasonal. It doesn't often use multiple grade level, or it often uses multiple grade levels at once. So it's typically designed more for a family and a family lifestyle so that you could teach more than one child at once at a time. It's more of a mastery overall time-wise than it is mastery at that specific grade level. And it is not at all similar to what's done in most public and private schools. So we're going to start with, I'm just going to go through some of the basics that you'll hear out there. When I started researching, I remember seeing these going, what the heck are they? And I spent almost all my time going, well, I don't understand what this one is. So I would go back and look because there's some really cool stuff out there, and knowing sort of where you fall on this line will definitely help as you move through. So we're going to start with the most structured. So the most structured would be a public school at home. So this would be almost like you're still enrolled in school, super structured, where other people are teaching, usually online. So like the online K-12, connections, TTU K-12, some of those online things. Usually the child still has to meet state standards within that and attendance standards. So that is, those and virtual academies are the most structured, and they're typically what you would hear is accredited through the state. So the state is controlling that part. So then we move on, and probably the most structured you get within the homeschool community is the all-in-one curriculum or a box curriculum. So this is where everything you would need for an entire year, lesson plans, workbooks, books, supplemental books, teacher's guides, everything that would lay out for you day by day what you should be doing would come in this box. So there's some examples of that: Sunlight and My Father's World, Abeka, the Calvert School. Those are all things where you pay and you get everything that you would need. So those tend to be the more expensive education options because you're getting everything at once. So the next level down would be classical education. So classical education consists of 3 stages of learning, which can generally be placed into the elementary, middle, and high school ages. So grammar, which is generally an elementary age, it's the idea is that you're learning the vocabulary of a subject. So you're focused on remembering information in that stage. And then the next stage would be the logic or the dialectic stage. And in that stage, it's about asking questions and sorting and comparing and practicing the knowledge from the grammar stage that you've already learned. And then you would get to the rhetoric, which is the high school age, where you are communicating what you have learned through writing, speech, and conversation. So those are the 3 basic stages that a classical education follows. Some examples of curriculums that are classical include Classical Conversations, the Well-Trained Mind Academy, or Press, and the Memoria Press. So you'll hear that one tossed out a lot too. There's a lot of people who do classical education. So the next one, which is out there but not as popular as classical education, is the Thomas Jefferson education. So this is sometimes also called a leadership education. And this is based on 4 phases of learning that are the core phase, the love of learning phase, the transition to scholar phase, and the scholar phase. So Thomas Jefferson education typically focuses on classic literature over using textbooks, having mentors as opposed to teachers, being inspirational as opposed to making requirements, managing content, not micromanaging a student, quality, not conformity, using a simple curriculum, and then the focus on apparent learning and bringing the student along for the ride. So that is Thomas Jefferson. And then we move down just a little bit and we get to a Waldorf education. And you'll see there's schools out there who apply to the Waldorf education as well. So this learning process is based on thinking, feeling, and doing. The focus is on experiences and not just reading about experiences. And the arts are very, very integrated into all learning in the Waldorf education. So some of the examples that you'll hear from that are Oak Meadow and Live Education. And I forgot to mention before we go any further that there is a worksheet that has this spectrum on it in the classroom, and it's got the whole spectrum and it lists all of these examples as well. So if you'd like that, it is there. So moving on to a Charlotte Mason education. This is where the Charlotte Mason education focuses on educating the whole child. So the concept is that you're developing an atmosphere, which is creating a home that a child will learn well in, a discipline, developing good habits, and a life, teaching living thoughts and ideas, not just dry facts. So some examples of that are simply Charlotte Mason, Sunlight, and Ambleside. And then a lot of people also combine things to make Charlotte Mason work for them. So, and then the last one on the slide is we're going to talk about unit studies. So unit studies, you hear a lot about too, but it's just essentially learning one topic in an interesting and engaging way that makes a student want to learn more. So it typically does not categorize learning into subjects. So you wouldn't do science and history and English and math. You would do it all together while you're learning a subject. So examples of that, of curriculums that are like that are My Father's World, Weaver, and Tapestry of Grace. So the next that you'll hear is Montessori, which is also a really popular one out there in schools as well. But this is based on a self-directed activity and hands-on learning. So it's a lot of collaborative play, The parent is a trained hands-on guide, but allows the child to make choices. So it's very much about guiding and play. And then we move on to some other terms that people will hear. So you hear the term relaxed curriculum or relaxed schooling, and that is someone or a family who uses curriculum, but in a pretty relaxed and unstructured way. So they're not quite to the point of unschooling yet, but they are not on the structured end. They might use a more structured curriculum, but then make it unstructured for themselves. And then just some terms out there that are new and that there's constantly new terms coming up. but these were some interesting ones that I've heard a lot recently. So you've got game schooling, which these are people who use board games as an essential tool in learning. So it can involve other aspects of schooling, but playing games is a major part of their actual school day. And then you have wild schooling, which is also forest schooling, which you hear there's schools out there like that too. And this is just usually a focus on nature and being in nature. This is usually some sort of combination of Waldorf, Charlotte Mason, and unschooling, a lot of those different philosophies that show up in there. And then you have what they call road schooling or world schooling. And these are just families who use real world experiences and typically a lot of travel as the basis for their education. So they are traveling from place to place, and that's where they're doing. So if they're traveling to DC, they're doing American history because they're going to all the places, or if they're traveling to the ocean, they're doing science and learning about the ocean. So it's using those experiences as they go. And then you get to unschooling, and unschooling is not schooling, even though that's what it sounds like, but it's just using a child's interests and readiness to dictate what and how the child studies. So often families who unschool use a ton of different resources and experiences. They're just not using a set curriculum. So they're basing what their child is learning on their interests and their readiness. And again, a lot of people think this is not doing anything, but typically people who unschool spend a lot of time helping prep and find stuff for their children as they're doing that. So each of these are just philosophies, and they all are good and useful. It's really about finding what works for you and what works for what you want the education to be. You could just pick one and go with it, or you could do a mishmash of them. And I find a lot of people end up taking pieces from each one and sort of making their own. And we call that eclectic homeschooling. There's a lot of eclectic homeschoolers out there who really love this piece of the classical education, and so they take that piece, and they really love this part of Montessori, so they take that piece, and so they kind of mishmash what they're putting together to do. And that usually is easier after the first year. That first year of picking what you want to do, it's really good to like figure out where you sort of fall, and then pick one and sort of research the curriculum that you're looking for. So once you have developed your goals and figured out your style and your kid's style, and then you've done all this research on philosophies, the next sort of crucial part is to build some community. So we're all searching for it, we all need it, and it can be hard if everyone you know is doing something different and you're homeschooling. So I am really grateful that we live in El Paso, and there are tons of homeschoolers here and a lot of different ways to get involved. Just some of the basics. I know Kara's going to talk more about community later tonight, but just some basics that we have here. We have Facebook groups, and you can even just find Instagram hashtags of things that you're interested in and find people that way. Obviously conferences, we were really hopeful that this would be more of a community conference, and sadly it's virtual, so hopefully we can still meet each other and do that. And then there's always just community resources. So there are co-ops. There are several different kinds of co-ops in town, some that range from super structured to some that are a lot more fun and just do extra sort of classes. There's meetup groups, book clubs, nature groups, 4-H, art groups, sports, lots of sports and music and dance. So there's tons of ways to get involved. And El Paso Homeschool Association has some of those listed on the website as a way to help you connect, but also just talking to people within the chat and that you are meeting through the conference. And then sometimes if you can't find what you're looking for, what I love about the homeschool community is that people just create it. So if you can't find what you're looking for, we as mostly homeschooling mamas can pick it up and make sure it happens. So for example, my daughter really likes being out in nature, and I really wanted to make that more of an integral part of our group, and I just couldn't find anyone doing it, so we started it. And it's had its ups and downs, but we have a really good core group now, and it's been really nice to have those weekly meetup groups to do that. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra work and making it happen to do that. So now we can put it all together. So you've got your goals and your teaching style, their learning style, figuring out which philosophy, and then building your community. So there is also on the classroom a worksheet that you can use to work through all of this and some of the different questions to ask if you want to download that as well. But then at some point you can research and research and research, and then it's just time to start. So you have to just begin somewhere, and you can always change. So I think sometimes we think we get to a point and we've spent money on this curriculum and we're going to use it, but 2 months in, it's just not working, and that's okay. It's okay to backtrack and to take a break and then to find something new. I think that's the nice thing about homeschooling is that we're not locked into one thing forever. But knowing that it's going to shift as you change your lifestyle, as your kids grow, as life around you changes, as circumstances change, it's okay for it to shift. And no matter what you pick, there's going to be really good days, there's going to be really hard days, there's going to be a little bit of everything in between. And it's okay, because it is still a really good choice to make. So after you've started, you're going to have days where you start to doubt and you start to wonder if you're really doing this the right way, or if you are missing things, or if you're going to ruin your kids forever. All the things that we start to think. And then people ask questions too about what we are doing, because while homeschooling is growing, it is still not the most normal thing for people to do. So some of the common doubts that I have asked myself and that I've heard other people is just, what are we going to do if our kids miss something? Like they're going to miss some sort of fact or time period or lesson. What am I going to do? How do I know if I'm doing enough? And I think I just always come back to just a fact that it's rare for a public school teacher to make it through an entire curriculum in a year. Most public school students don't. Most public school students also miss something at some point. And so I think if you go back to your goals of knowing, like if your kid knows how to learn something and you've taught them how to solve problems and figure stuff out, then they're going to be able to figure it out. We're not all going to know everything at any given time. And so I think it's just really comforting to know that. Or I'm not smart enough to teach my kids. That's very, very, very rarely a case at all. If you know how to learn and you want to teach your kids, then you can teach your kids. It's not easy, but it is doable. So the big socialization question everyone always asks, how are our kids going to be socialized? But the truth is that there's no data to back up that lack of socialization. So kids who are homeschooled tend to actually be able to speak better to both kids and adults. And usually have no problems unless you're locking them away in your house and never leaving. They're not going to have problems with socialization as long as you are involved in a community. And then people will disagree with your choice. That's okay. It is not for everyone, homeschooling. So there are different options for everyone because we can't all do the exact same thing. So it's okay if they disagree with you, and it's okay if you're just doing what you need to. I am going to go over a couple more just little details. We do have Texas Homeschool Coalition is much better at the law side of it, and they're sort of our partner organization for the law part. But just a real basic information on Texas homeschool laws. They're really quite simple. The instruction must be bona fide, just means it needs to be real and not a sham. It needs to be visual, so books, videos. It can't just be made up. That's essentially what that means. And then you have to teach reading, spelling, grammar, math, and good citizenship. And that's it. That's the law in the state of Texas. There's no need to register. There is no need to keep records, although some people do keep records for themselves. And then if you have a child who's in school and you want to homeschool, you do have to unenroll them. And you can get all of the information for that on thsc.org. They actually provide a pre-fill letter that you can go on and fill in and then send off, and then give you exactly what you need to do and the steps that you need to do to take that. And just a reminder, these are Texas laws. every state has different laws. So if you move between states, you need to figure out what that state's laws are so that you are abiding by them. But Texas is one of the easiest states to homeschool in, as there are no requirements at all. So I think that is it. So if there are any questions, Julia or Raquel.
There, I had to unmute myself. I just have one question, because we had a mention of a forest group in the chat. So I wanted to ask you about Wild and Free, because I know that's a group you organize locally. So I was curious if you might want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm, last time I looked into the forest school, it was mostly for younger children, like preschool age and maybe kindergarten, first grade. So Wild and Free is not a forest school. It is more of a just nature group. So we actually meet up every week to do a hike, or sometimes we meet in the park and do yoga, or we'll go to the archaeology museum or the pistachio farm, so different things like that. So we meet up every week. There's usually at least 2 hikes a month, and then maybe 2 other things. So yeah, it's really just a nature group. We spend multiple hours outside hiking and being with each other and looking at nature and being a part of nature. So, and that it's a very Charlotte Mason philosophy thing to do.
Yeah, it's also a lot of fun. I've been on some of the hikes, and it's been great fun. They do have a group on Facebook if you're interested in Wild and Free as well, just to let you guys know. And we have a question from Sarah regarding grammar. What does this translate to in the older grades? Let me see.
So grammar
Sarah,
within...
That's what I'm going to ask. Do you mean like grammar instruction for older grades? Awesome. Yes. So grammar instruction in older grades. What would you
So I think that comes back to language arts. So really the grammar, reading, spelling is just language arts as a whole. So if your child can put together a sentence and do writing, I think you could go formal and do grammar classes, or you could go all the way informal and just do reading and writing structure. That I don't, there's no, Texas doesn't mandate exactly what that looks like, just that you have to know how to, I take grammar as you have to know how to write. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's how I take it.
I would argue that's correct too. Aw, thank you, Sarah, for asking the question. Well, we really appreciate you guys tuning in for this. And if you just give me 1 second, I am going to get our giveaway going here. Okay, let me see. All right, Amanda Vivenzio. You are our winner of the All About Spelling Level 1.
Okay, great.
If you email me at julia@elpasohomeschool.org, we're going to ship that, correct? Or drop it off?
Either one.
Local. We will figure it out, but if you email me at julia@elpasohomeschool.org, we will get that to you. But thank you guys again for tuning in, and thank you, Lindsay, for sharing your experience with us. And I'm going to hand it over to Raquel for some final notes before our next session.
Hi, thank you everyone for joining us. Lindsay, thank you so much. That is so informational. That is a lot in a nutshell. So anyone listening to the talk that Lindsay gave, please don't feel overwhelmed. It's good. It's better to know all of these points, and then little by little, you'll go filling them in. I know that's the way it was for us. The first year we started homeschooling, we didn't try to figure it out all at once. And I think Lindsay did a good job of stating that. And again, just want to give a big hand. We can't give you an applause, but thank you so much, Lindsay, for putting all that. You know, that took a lot of time. You kind of save us a little bit of time of having to go research what does this style mean, and what does this learning this learning style that my child has, or this particular style of homeschooling. So because you've taken the time and heart to look into all of that research, that's something that we can now have the notes on. So the Google Classroom has the notes on it, which is available for those that have signed up as members. Just want to let you know that's available. And want to let you know of a few more announcements. One of the things that Lindsay was talking about in the introduction to homeschooling is a lot of these different styles. So if you just want more, just want to squeeze the juice out of that a little bit more, please make sure that you come back and join us Saturday morning. That workshop is at 10:30 a.m. because we're going to do something we've never done before. Us that work as the team of the El Paso Homeschool Association, we're usually behind the scenes. So usually at the conference, you don't see us too much and we don't do a lot of speaking. But we're actually going to do a live panel where Julia's going to help us talk through a lot of different topics. So you'll be able to see, Lindsay shared a little bit of how she does things at home with her kiddos, and we're all going to share a little bit of that. So especially if you're still starting out, it's really great because it just helps put your mind at ease. Like, it doesn't have to look this way. So please come back on Saturday morning for that live session. And for right now, I just want to let you know we're going to have a break right now. We'll be back at 7 p.m. with an official welcome. We're going to open up in prayer, and we are going to introduce the members of the team that I'm talking to you about. So, and then we're going to come in with our keynote speaker, Kara Anderson. Her topic is going to be Better Together, How Community Helps Us Thrive. So as Lindsay mentioned, we really wanted this to be an in-person conference, and we wanted to spend time as a community together. So we're doing that virtually. Hey, it didn't stop us all the way, okay? We're doing it virtually, and we still have as soon as the government says we can gather again, we are going to put together an in-person event so that everyone that's here right now, we can get together in person. So, so Kara is actually talking on that topic. So it is how community helps us thrive. So important. Sometimes if we're trying to get along on homeschooling and then you just feel isolated, that can set us back. So she's going to talk to us about how that community will help us thrive. That is all for now, and we'll see everyone back at 7 p.m.